Exploragonians. Wow, you went really low there. That's nice.
Exploragonians. Yeah, go.
Exploragonians.
Oh, I guess I could have like kept the beat
No,
going.
there's absolutely no. You're dancing.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, you ready to get this party started?
Everybody, welcome to episode 1. I wish that I had a bottle of champagne to like smash up against our computer. You know how they do like a ship? This ship has sailed.
And then our computer breaks, and then that's the end.
It would just be the monitor though. So I mean the rest of the computer could work because I do think some people, the hot new trend is to just take your screen off of like your laptop and you're like, it still works.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. So, thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this flagship episode with Katie and I.
All right, so we're a couple from the same small town on the Oregon coast.
Are we just like a normal, like a couple of friends? Like, establish the relationship.
We are a married couple from the Oregon coast.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
From the little town of Tillamook, famous for our cheese.
And some delicious ice cream. And I don't know, the rumor was that it couldn't make it to the East Coast because the air in the ice cream or like something they would make it explode if it went over the altitude of the Rocky Mountains. I don't know if that's true. Scientists, I know you're listening. Please weigh in.
I don't know that you can just drop this kind of fact that you are not educated on.
No, this is a dairy fact.
No, this is the real deal. There was trucks. They were trying to make it over the mountain. Yeah.
And the ice cream would pop?
Well, supposedly.
Okay, well, let's...
Anyway, so let's go. So how did we meet, Jordan?
Well, I have a distinct memory of meeting you in band class. I was mortified of anybody that was older than me, and I was pretty young for my class, so that was pretty much everybody. And
Wait, you were?
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
I was... Wait, that was younger than most of the people in my class?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little baby. Not like a super baby, but I mean, you're pretty OLD for your class.
Yeah.
You know, school's so weird. It's like, oh, what month were you born in? It's like this weird, I don't know, I think you go through puberty at different stages. It's all a sham, people.
All right.
Anyway, you talked to me, like, when we were getting ready for our first football pep band game.
Did I pep you up?
I think you did. I think it was that cheerleader in you kind of coming through. But you were looking really cute in, like, your official Tillamook High School
band, pep band sweatshirt.
It was a pretty basic black sweatshirt with like a white stripe going down either arm, and I think our director's wife maybe painstakingly embroidered every one with this itty bitty like logo over your heart that had, I think it had like a saxophone playing music or something.
Okay.
The end.
Well,
so you were wearing that, you were super cute, and you're like, oh my gosh, hi, and I was like, and I was probably like, hello.
Well, it didn't leave an impression for me, but
That is probably one of the rudest things I've ever heard in my life.
But I played the clarinet, everyone's favorite pep band instrument.
God, and your hot ass boyfriend played the drums. Never stood a chance.
Jordan played
Tuba.
the tuba.
But I became a very good tubist. I was an all-state tubist for the state of Oregon.
And I was not for the clarinet, so
You had more competition.
I didn't even try. So I'm proud of you, and we're looking for a tuba because he rented.
Well, I didn't even rent. I just kind of took. I was like, oh, this is mine this year.
For the school, because it just lives there.
Yeah, it just lived there. They would be mounted on the back of the wall in the band room. Anyway,
Okay.
so our paths didn't really cross unless we were going to a concert for band or doing like something for the pep band. And then you and I went to outdoor school together, and Tillamook County has a really special outdoor school program for 6th grade kids to go, and they live for a week out in the wilderness, which, it being rural Oregon, is pretty easy to find.
Okay.
But we were counselors together and became friends. And so our paths kind of like didn't necessarily cross, but we had that connection.
And then I went off and traveled, gallivanted, and Jordan went away to college. And then we both ended up back in our hometown. And
So while you were experiencing like real things in the world, I was reading about real
Ye-
things in the world.
you were experiencing right, so we just have different experiences, which is good. And then yeah, we like reconnected and became really great friends.
I would even say best friends,
So much that I thought Jordan was going to be my maid of honor, like in my wedding.
which at that point I was definitely crushing on you pretty hard. And so to hear that was crushing for me. I was like, yeah, Katie, I could, yeah, I'd do that for you. Be a pal.
Man, but then you went all the way.
I did go all the way. Well, you initiated. Katie kissed me, so she went all the way.
I went all the way. Okay.
And now we're going to do a podcast about travel.
But why do we want to do this podcast?
I think because you and I, we've traveled a decent amount compared to a lot of people from other small towns.
Well, at least compared to people in our lives. And, but now we together have been to more than 20 countries and counting.
Yeah, and I've been to like a third of the United States. You've been to over half.
And we know that it's not the most, like that there's a lot of people that have traveled significantly more than us, and people that have traveled significantly less. And I think that we're somewhere in between those, and that, we have our own unique stories like everybody does, but that we want to share, that we just want to share.
And I think there's something with the way you and I travel. Like, we're not going on any sort of tours. Like, we're definitely backpacking for the most part. Or we're staying with, like, friends that we have made who we have some connection with here. And so that's been a big benefit for us. But for us to go and be abroad, we almost bring this, like, small town value with us, where growing up in Tillamook, again, really small town, I'm related to, like, most of the population, which is pretty cool.
So you had to be on your best behavior.
More or less. Best behavior, because anybody that you were interacting with, either you knew personally, or you knew that they knew someone that, they knew. I knew that they knew my grandma, and my grandma wasn't going to take any of my baloney.
Right. And like for me, I was just thinking about growing up here, and my family volunteered a lot. We were just really involved with the community and just getting to know somebody, and just helping and understanding that everyone has a story and everybody is working hard to make something happen. In Tillamook in '96, there was a really bad flood, and just people needed a lot of help. And just, I think at a young age, I just saw the value of connecting with people and finding out their story and how to help, how to listen,
because you and I will like go get a coffee, and then invariably, if there's nobody else behind us, like we'll just sit and chat up the barista, so much so that they become like really good friends, or then they help out with our wedding, like doing coffee for us. And so because of that, I think we subconsciously, when we travel, either domestically or abroad, like we are bringing this like uber friendliness to try to create some sort of quick, sincere connection with people.
And I think also when we are going out of our way, that's not even true. We don't go out of our way. I think it's just what naturally comes. Like we try to see somebody and meet them where they're at. And this has happened countless times where people are so surprised and are really gracious towards us and are like, wow, thank you for being a kind human being. And just something so basic is showing kindness or patience with somebody. And I just think that we try to get to know people, and whether they are an employee working their ass off at Disneyland and we ask how they are, and they start crying,
like tears of joy for like being seen for the first time.
Yeah.
Or you are a nun in a remote Thai village who only speaks Thai and Karen.
Right. And like she was so, I don't know. I just, language isn't a barrier. I just think that there's so much room for connection no matter where you are and who you are and where you are. Whatever. I mean, we are looking and open to connection at any point. Any point of the day, any place. Nothing's off off limits.
So I think a lot of where we're coming from with this podcast is to kind of encourage you to open up when you do travel, whether that's around your town, your state. If you are going international, to really be open to other people's stories, especially like cultural differences, and being really sensitive and having an open heart to people.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, that even just goes in, right, like your hometown, going to your local grocery store. I mean, I feel like it goes without saying, but I think it probably should be said.
It's like a part of like what we have done by sharing our own stories, even locally in our small town. Like I believe we have encouraged and inspired some other people who had no intentions. Like they didn't see a path for them to actually be able to travel or to get out of our little town, but because us too as like ambassadors of being able to do that and being able to like creatively do that has really kind of like changed some people's lives.
Yeah. So I guess whether you have travel aspirations, you can no longer travel, or maybe you just have no travel intentions at all.
And just want to hear like some weird, wonderful stories from Katie and I, like maybe getting in over our heads pretty regularly.
Yeah, and like our insights, definitely our misadventures, and just how beautiful the world can be and is.
And so what you can expect is every episode we're going to bring you our kind of breakdown in some of our stories of a different country we visited, a region we visited, a state, a city, a national park. And we're just going to bring you our own experiences. We're not pretending to be like a Rick Steves. We're not pretending to be an Anthony Bourdain. But I think what we have to share is valuable, and I hope that you guys can glean something from it yourselves. So we're looking forward to being on this journey together.
And bringing our top-notch energy.
I'm a guitar.
Me too.
Wow.
That horrible improver.
Do you know how many months separate us?
Is this a quiz?
Yeah, it's a quiz.
14?
14? I think it's about 18.
Is it 18?
Yeah, you're like a November baby. I'm a June baby.
Great.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm everything Katie didn't want in a relationship because I'm younger than him.
You are younger than him.
I'm younger than you, and I'm also from Tillamook. And so, yeah.
You weren't as like cultured as I thought I would. I don't even know. Like, right, what did I think that I wanted?
I don't know. Some people have like an ideal like partner in their mind. Like I had one, and let me tell you what my ideal partner was when I was a young boy. Okay, so it was a woman who was left-handed and owned a brown pair of Converse. That was literally like my dream right there.
It's very specific.
And did you check both those boxes?
Apparently. And then it's like, I don't know how I feel about it. We're like, oh, okay, is this all based off this like weird little fantasy? Oh, you're left-handed and you had a brown pair of Converse that we both, I guess, wore during a musical we were in.
I think we both had to get it. We were like contractually obligated to get these brown Converse for the Wizard of Oz show that we did.
Right. And who made that decision?
Well, I think the director made that decision.
All right, everybody, now you need to go buy a pair of Converse.
Yeah, we all looked similar. I don't know. What high school musical is going to make you go purchase like a 30, 40 pair of shoes?
I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to take a survey. So if you are have ever had to purchase your own stuff, like brand new pair of shoes for a musical, we want to know. We want to hear from you.
Specifically a brand new pair of shoes that you really probably didn't have any intention of wearing anytime else.
Yeah. I just feel like that's like performance arts.
Performance arts.
God, that sounds really weird. I'm like, okay.
Yummy. Does it taste good in the mouth? Good mouthfeel?
Okay.
So, Katie, what will this episode be about?
This is a introduction to who we are, what's happening, what we want to. I guess we want to talk about what we want to talk. Wow, we want to talk about what we want to talk about. We want to tell you about some travel tales, some ups, some downs,
some all arounds, some bits, some bots.
Yeah. What do you want to?
I'm hoping that this episode, is an intro to who you and I are, kind of setting the foundation of like these two people who are about to go on like a bunch of different adventures. We've had, with the pandemic, we've been far enough removed from a lot of these travels to like really look at them. Some will get the nostalgia lens. Others, I think we have to remember how terrible sometimes were. Case in point, being in that mountain village is really fun in retrospect. But when we're in that mountain village in Thailand, it was like, are we ever going to leave? Are we trapped here? I don't know. No one's really communicating with us.
I think that travel is this like emotional experience, and it can bring out the best and worst qualities. And I think it gives you just a different view of how you are, and, away from home, and you have different challenges that you're up against. So, yeah, we definitely want to share our experiences as two small town
Oregonians
that have left the state.
I would say left the continent, which is also a big thing. We've left the continent multiple times.
That's true.
We're not on that Rick Steves level, mostly because we're not like in our middle age and we haven't been traveling for, like most of our lives at this point.
But also, I don't think that we're interested in giving out that type of advice. Like we're not really, it's like, this is where, I don't want to tell you where you need to stay or things that you have to do or where to eat, blah, blah, blah.
What to eat. Well, we might tell you what to eat.
I mean, we will give you some direction based on our own experiences, but I think my ultimate goal is to encourage you to put down the phone, step away from Google, use your senses, and yeah, it's like, where does your heart want to go? What do you want to do? What do you want to experience? And thinking differently and more freely.
I think for us, I was so obsessed with making up for lost time in terms of travel. Like, I didn't want to waste any time, like, using my brain or talking to locals, like, when we first were thinking of this. So my response was to read every Lonely Planet, read a photos or a rough guides from cover to cover, and really, like, get in the vibe of where I wanted to go. So much so that I wasn't even going to be... I was very rigid in my perspective. This is a terrible example, but the first time we really traveled, Katie took me to Disneyland. It was a get his feet wet, see if he's capable of doing anything. But yeah, it was the first time that, like, we could create our own itinerary. And so in my mind, what I had to do was plan out minute by minute what we were going to do to maximize joy at Disneyland. My mom had prepped me with all this stuff. She's like, what you have to do is you have to go to Space Mountain first. You have to grab the Fast Pass for Space Mountain. Don't go on it. Just get the Fast Pass. And then you can go do something. Then you have to go to Pirates of the Caribbean. Make sure you get on that within the first 15 minutes of opening. And so this was my mind, like, when we went to Disneyland.
I don't think that I knew that.
I think I kept it in, but I was like, yeah, Katie, we have to get we have a selfie video of us, like, marching to Tomorrowland as soon as it opened because I knew we had to get the Space Mountain Fast Pass. But then within 10 minutes of us being in Disneyland, I was like, wait, what if this is crazy. What if I just take all of this in and enjoy the moment that we're in? And I think that single lesson in Disneyland at like 8:30 in the morning really helped me going forward in our other travels. It was like, oh, maybe what works for you and I is to not be super rigid. I think what works for you and I is to meet the locals, language barrier or not, try to get a sense of, like, what they think we should see, what they like about the place that they're in. Obviously, they have a lot more experience than someone who Googled, like, coolest places in Thailand.com.
Well, okay, and I think that's something that we enjoy is getting to know people and meeting people all around the world. And it's not just about this going across the pond, wherever we're going. And it's like, oh, look at this building or look at this body of water. And those things are important, but a big piece for us is connection and making connections with other people, and not just other travelers, but definitely locals.
But yeah, so Katie, what is your personal relationship to travel?
Third grade Katie went on a solo trip, or so she felt. I had a little heart-shaped Tweety Bird purse and the only thing that was in it was some flavored chapstick. And I was going across the country to the East Coast. My cousin and I were able to go to this AVMA convention with our grandparents, which was a convention for veterinarians. And we must have been pretty independent because we were walking around the convention floor, just she and we ran into the Beethoven dog. He was a big, I don't even know what kind of dog is that?
He's a
Saint
Saint
Bernard.
Bernard.
Just like Nana from Peter Pan. I mean, this was a big dog, was very friendly. I think the movie was pretty big and maybe had just come out at that moment or like the year prior. And so to say we were stoked is an understatement. We were very excited.
So was it the first celebrity you ever met?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, it was a big deal. I was like, oh my God. I think we told everybody. I was like, we met the Beethoven dog. And there was a couple people there and they interviewed us. And maybe they were walking by and it was a radio station. And so they're like, oh, hey, young kids, you want to be on the radio? And so they had asked us what we thought about Beethoven. And yeah, we just did this little interview and they told us we were going to be on the radio, which was very exciting. You know, celebrity status. Right up there with Beethoven. And so then we told our grandparents and everybody else that we were going to be on the radio. We went back to our hotel room, tried to tune in, but guess what? We didn't know which radio station it was or how to find it. So we never actually heard the interview.
I think that's on the people who interviewed you. They should have been like, hey, this is, KRKZ. Like,
I know.
those shock jocks. You can't trust them.
I know. So, claim to fame. We met Beethoven and we're on the radio.
But that was not the first time you were on a plane, right?
No, my first trip happened with my family, like in first grade. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that this trip felt more solo because I was without them. And even though I was with my grandparents and my cousin, you know, I didn't have that security of my family. But, you know, another trip with them happened probably a year later or so. We were in Port Angeles, Washington. And because we have family up there. And from Port Angeles, you can take a ferry to Victoria, Canada, which then I think you didn't age your passport. So you could just get on the boat and go. So we did that. We got on the ferry and bought all the snacks, you know, whatever you could buy on the ferry. And there's a memory of my mom and I going up to the counter. You know, she hands over a American $20 bill and the employee hands her back like 15 Canadian cash, I don't know, loonies, toonies, whatever it is. And it looks like play money to me. And it's also a lot of money. It was like, wait a minute.
$15.
Right. It was like, we just bought a lot of stuff. I don't think 15 is right. And so to have this, like, I remember my mom's like kind of discussing it back and forth with this woman and like trying to like, I don't think so. And like, are you sure you like, you know, added everything up? And
sounds like maybe you guys should have studied up on the exchange rates a little more.
well, I'm sure we just went on a whim.
Nice.
So, like, I think we just went over there for the day. Like, it was like, yeah, we didn't stay. We just got on the boat, went over.
Got your play money.
Right. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Maybe we went to the ATM.
Which, okay, so, like, I don't know if Canada has, like, upgraded the art on their bills recently, but yeah, it does, you know, give that vibe that it's play money. You know, when you think of currency in the U.S., it's all very stern, it's very important. And then you get Canada, who's like, oh, actually, we put things that we actually care about on here, not pyramids with eyes. Look, here's a group of, like, guys playing hockey. And it just has a much better vibe.
So fun. But yeah, even before I went into high school, I'd already been to like a handful of states.
But I also think with you in high school, what's also important to know is like you started to be very receptive to other cultures. I mean, you probably were already like that. I mean, you grew up knowing that like your grandparents had hosted a French exchange student and Japanese exchange students, but you were not afraid of the international exchange students that came to Tillamook High School.
I think that like I wasn't even really aware of them until I was. And then I was like, wait, like I had choir with 2 Thai girls and one spoke really great English, one did not. And yeah, but I loved connecting with them and loved like just learning. I think I just loved connecting with people. And then it was just, it was really great for me to imagine myself visiting them in Thailand. And unfortunately that never happened. But yeah, in high school, I had thought like it wasn't out of the question for me to like go there. I didn't see as that was like an obstacle or like, oh, this thing that I couldn't do.
That was like your junior year with the two Thai girls, right?
Yes. And then my senior year, I was like, I don't need to limit myself, right? It's like friends with all the exchange student. Because, yeah, our small high school hosted what? 8, 10
10-ish
Mm-hmm.
on average, yeah.
Right. And we've had, I mean, I'm trying to think, 600 kids at school? More?
Maybe. That's probably a pretty good ballpark.
So,
But see, that your senior year was my junior year, as we established. So I met all those exchange student kids before they started school. And so I remember, because I was a part of the high school leadership team, we had to meet them and be their liaisons. And I remember just being mortified of these people. I assumed none of them spoke English. I wouldn't be able to connect with any of them. What would I possibly have in common with a 17-year-old German kid? And it was just, my brain was just so squishy and small at that point. It's like, I looking back, I have so much regret about like not reaching out to those kids more, establishing better bonds. And thankfully, you ended up having really good bonds with those kids. And since then, we've gone on to like really solidify those friendships by visiting them in their own homes.
I know. They didn't have an option. It was like, scoot over. I'm coming.
Well, Katie, you are so bold. You did what? You invited yourself to what?
Well, I mean, as this should come as no surprise now that I invited myself and I invited our other friend to come with me to a friend's wedding. And then like reflecting, this is kind of weird. We did like crash in their apartment, like on an like air mattress or something. And except for their wedding night, I think they did kick us out. But
That's so nice of you to leave that night.
I think we were helpful.
Yeah, Katie decides she's not invited to our German friend's wedding. So Katie decides to go to Germany.
I don't know that I was like exclusively not invited, but I think I was like, hey, where's my invite?
Yeah, so you end up there and you're like, oh, hey, our friend in Belgium, you invite her to come with.
I needed a date.
So my relationship with travel is very different from Katie's. My entire world was pretty much like a 75-mile radius. Except it didn't go west because then that was the sea. So I would say it went 75 degrees, 75 miles on like the east side. So like we would go, I don't really feel like anything north of like Rockaway Beach. Like that's about as far north as we went, which for reference is like an 18-minute drive from where you and I are sitting right now in our hometown.
Mm-hmm.
It went as far south as Newport, as far east as like Beaverton. But I always thought that was Portland growing up. I was like, oh my gosh, we're here. Part of that was my mom would be like, oh, should we go to Portland? And so, of course, once we got over like the little mountain highway that we had to take, all of a sudden, lo and behold, we're in Portland. And I don't think I even went into Portland really until I was like 8 or 9. And we went to a Portland Beavers, minor league baseball game. And we took the Max and I was like, where are we? I felt like I was in the future all of a sudden. And I don't remember leaving the state until I was probably like almost 10, maybe a little older. We had gone on a very big trip to Vancouver, Washington, which is literally across a bridge from Portland. And so I remember hearing about Vancouver. Obviously, people would talk about Vancouver in the British Columbia sense. And so obviously I thought we were in that Vancouver, which became very confusing for me when people would talk about Vancouver. I remember there was like an NBA team before they moved to Memphis. They were in Vancouver. They were the Vancouver Grizzlies because the NBA had 2 Canadian teams. And so I remember we went by like a vaguely athletic looking building that had a bear on it. And I was like, oh my God, is that where the Vancouver Grizzlies play? I mean, I was so naive, like aggressively naive to like what travel could be. The world seemed so vast. I remember learning about the Leaning Tower of Pisa once in like grade school and be like, in the next life I could go to Italy. And then when I got into like anime and manga and Nintendo, I was like, going to Japan would be so cool in the next life. Like I never had any intention of ever traveling. And so, yeah, when I graduated from high school, the idea was like fun, bombastic, flamboyant Jordan was going to go to New York and be on Broadway. And I would never tell people not that when they assumed. I'd be like, yeah, that sounds good. But I had no plans of getting there. I didn't have any support or like knew how to even ask for it. And going to LA after college was like, yeah, well, that's kind of what I went to school for, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get there. And so I think I took a very passive route in my life. But the first time I was on a plane was when I was 14. The Tillamook High School band got invited by the lieutenant governor of Hawaii for our band to come and play for a Memorial Day event at Pearl Harbor. And so the original plan was for our band to go to Japan for 3 weeks, but I don't think enough kids could really make that big swing. Like, yeah, we can afford to go to Japan for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I remember like the presentation because I too was in band and
But you didn't go to that Hawaii trip.
I didn't. And I don't know if I just had an attitude being like, I'm not going to go to Hawaii with the band kids. I don't know. I'm too cool.
It was so surreal to be like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to finally go on a plane. More surreal because I also was carrying a tuba with me. And so I remember we got to PDX at like 3 a.m. I'd never been to PDX. It is well regarded as being the best airport in the United States, maybe the world. Except Changi Airport in Singapore is so rad.
So good. Definitely go.
So we were in PDX at like 3 a.m. We're like running around because we're a bunch of like sleep deprived, dumb high school kids. And I remember getting on this plane that was like vast. Like it was like the size of like a small building. It was like incredible to see like the 3 bays of seats that you can sit on. And yeah, we went to Hawaii, and that was like my first real time that I'd ever been anywhere. And it was like my brain couldn't even comprehend that I'd just flown over like halfway over the Pacific Ocean. I got off the plane like that morning, and I remember it being really warm, but like it didn't really hit me. I guess being from the coast of Oregon, being like, well, there's the other part of the ocean. It feels like a bath. That's pretty cool. But yeah, after that trip, I mean, it was a very organized trip. It was about a week long. We always had like a tour guide. We did some snorkeling trips. But other than that, I mean, I had no intention of ever traveling again. I thought it sounded fun, but I didn't know how to make that happen.
Did you have support to go on that trip? Like, did you ever think you weren't going to go on that Hawaii trip?
Yeah, because we couldn't have afforded something like that. And shout out to our band director, John Coughlin, who I think he got into his like own pocket to like help me go. Mostly because I was like a poor little kid, but also I think he needed a tuba player to like bring some bass because, building a band out of like piecemeal was probably
right.
Interesting.
Only a small percentage of the band went.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty good though that you went. So right. He hadn't left the state really. A little crossover to Washington and then Hawaii.
So yeah, when we started to date when I was 22, I'd been out of the state.
Wait. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I'd been out of the state of Oregon exactly twice.
So when I was 18, after I graduated, I decided I was going to fly to Belgium for my first, like, I'm going to do this because that's what I want to do, like, international trip. And that was pretty much the start of my desire to travel and especially international travel. And I just felt like no one could hold me back or prevent me from doing that if I wanted to do that. And, and fortunately, like I had really 2 supportive parents who, they themselves hadn't traveled the world, but supported my desire to do so.
So yeah, I had this perception of you, and looking back, it's definitely it's a true perception that you were just this like absolutely free, independent, badass, like you just said, no one's gonna hold you back. Like you can go anywhere, do anything. And for me, it was like just the complete opposite of how I felt in that moment. That I was like so, it was like that opposites attract kind of thing. It was like, look, this person represents freedom. And I just thought that was so incredible how you could have the bravery and the fearlessness to, at that point, you went backpacking solo, Colombia and Ecuador. You had gone to Europe a couple times. You had gone cross country promoting Tillamook cheese. Went to so many states to do that. I was just so impressed by you, and I was so intimidated by your experience.
But I didn't always feel that way. I mean, felt like kind of like a fraud in the beginning, like this thing that I was kind of interested in but didn't know a lot about. And I had family and knew of some other people that had traveled significantly more and or that had way more funds and resources to do that, and I was just like this little farm girl who kind of went on some trips sometimes, which was more than some of like family members that I had that never got to go anywhere, didn't have any money to do anything. And so I was definitely just like kind of teetering on these two different realities. But I think there came a point that I decided that, why not me? I want to do this. I have this desire to see the world, and I didn't want to live with regret. And if I wanted to do that, I was going to make that happen, and no one was going to stop me. And, and then I think fear would like trickle in. Like people would be like, well, aren't you afraid? Or what if like X, Y, or Z happens? And it was just like, I'm not going to allow fear to rule my life. And so I just like I had to go for it. And thankfully I did have like supportive parents that were like, we're gonna help you make this happen. And even just emotionally, because right, if they had been anti, it would have been significantly more challenging, but I feel like I still would have done it.
But yeah, to have anybody voice support for you can quickly make you feel like you can accomplish anything.
Right.
And I think I lacked that. I mean, I lacked it to the point where I didn't even feel like I could express it.
Right. And I think you probably don't even realize that just how much someone's support or lack thereof impacts you. And that's why, like, right, your words matter, your actions matter, and treating people with kindness and respect matters.
But you had like, you also saw people who traveled. I never saw anybody. I couldn't tell you one person in my orbit of like friends or family who traveled. I mean, let alone going across an ocean. Like I think my grandparents on my dad's side, they were kind of snowbirds, so they would regularly go down to like Arizona. And that was pretty exotic. Like, ooh, what? Arizona? Must be so dusty. But, you had grandparents who were like, so we went to Denmark last week. And
But, I don't know that I fully comprehend. My brain was also, like, small.
Small and mushy. But your grandparents' house is also full of, like, worldwide curios.
Which, again, this is, like, something that now I can look around and see that. But when I was younger, I don't think that I was looking around being like, oh, where did this come from? Like, oh, this is, like, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that made sense, didn't it?
Yeah, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
This is a piece of the Berlin Wall. Blah, blah, blah.
Right. And so I think that I didn't fully comprehend what I had, what they had, where they had been, or even to the extent of how many people they had hosted. And, but for my grandparents, they were very social, wanted to get to know people of all different backgrounds. And
they'd pick up hitchhikers.
Right. And just like different stories. And, my parents are like that too. And so I just think I've always been curious about people that aren't from our small town. I didn't want to be here necessarily. I didn't feel like this was it for me. I felt like there was a big world out there, and I didn't want to not know what was out there. And my dad has like a classmate that showed up maybe when I was in high school, and he lives in New Zealand now, and had like a farm there, and I just met a lot of different people that were not from this area. And like Jillian, she grew up in Singapore, and
I remember just being really nervous around people like that. Like one of my best friends is from Mexico, and I even think with the big like Mexican population in our area, I feel like I was also nervous to like talk about like their culture at all. Like I was like intentionally like whitewashing my friends, even like my friend, like he and I, like I don't think I ever asked him about like anything about his culture. It'd always be like, so did you like the new episode of Avatar last night? Or are you excited about the new Spider-Man game? It was just kind of finding a common ground that I was comfortable with.
Yeah. I mean, I think that sometimes people are like, you're waiting for someone else to bring it up and be like, oh, like, is it okay to talk about this or not? I mean, yeah, so like I said, we have a dairy farm and we had some people that have worked for us for like 20 years. And I mean, again, I was in grade school and we would have like birthday parties and they were, it was a big fiesta and I would get to eat all this food that they had been preparing. And it was a very eye-opening experience to Mexican culture that I hadn't been exposed to, and really haven't been exposed to since. I mean, it was like a very different time, and and since then we have now been to Mexico, and I feel like I just have that much more of a deeper appreciation for that culture.
At least you were exposed to that. I mean, I don't think I was exposed to any Spanish growing up. I mean, we didn't have Dora the Explorer at that point.
Right.
And it's a different Latinx kid, but his name was Adrian. And I remember the only thing that he ever exposed me to was he introduced the whole school to Pokemon. And that was his his cultural contribution. He brought some stuff from Japan over. Yeah. I mean, Uno Dos Tres, I didn't even learn about that until I was in junior high.
Right. I mean, like my dad and we thought we were going to sign up for Rosetta Stone, and like, learning language is difficult. And I think that is probably the hardest thing when we travel is like, I love finding different creative ways to communicate, but yeah, like wanting to have a dialogue at that level and not being able to, is frustrating, which, yeah, totally whatever. I just finished Niall DeMarco's book about Deaf Utopia, and that's what he was talking about with like ASL and like wanting to communicate in his native language, but when people don't know sign language. And anyway, I know communication, you guys.
Man, this has been quite a sidebar about language and culture.
I know, we're all over the place.
Anyway, so I graduated from college, moved back home. I no intentions of ever traveling or doing anything, and so Katie and I got together. And when we finally started to date, we had like kind of a real talk, and you're like, Jordan, if this is gonna last, like you have to have a passport. And I was like, oh God. And then it became like this real thing, like I'm gonna start traveling, maybe, or that's gonna be an expectation. And so suddenly I went from having like really no realistic desires to travel to being like, what are we gonna do? Like this is really gonna be coming up soon for us.
Well, and did you feel at that point you had a desire to travel after learning about my own experiences?
I think I did, but I was also, it was like the New York thing. Like, it was like, no, if it happens, like, I'm not going to take a lot of agency in this.
Right.
Because at that point, like, I hadn't caught the travel bug, really. Even though Disneyland was pretty crazy.
Well, and, we went to, in like, 6 months or like a year, we went to Canada like 3 different times. We just kept ending up in like Victoria.
Yeah, over and over again.
I mean, I guess even from that standpoint, like, right, it was good that you had a passport that we could just, I think, and not have limitations. So fine. Maybe when we're like, oh, we're going to get this passport and you're going to travel the world, but you're going to get this passport so that we can go to place XYZ if we want to.
So then, lo and behold, fast forward to today, how do you think that like travel has changed you at this point?
I think when I think about my travels, I think about the different people that I have met. This is it, right? It's like, oh, we're all different, but we're all the same, right? We all have similar things that we care about. The world's not that big, and it gives me just a greater appreciation for not only what I have or what we don't have, and to find beauty in little things. And
like the like in Bangkok, where all of the telephone wires are just like all inexplicably like jumbled into like one mass.
Yeah, it was like a beautiful piece of art.
It was kind of like that for sure.
Or like when we were in Tequila, Mexico, and everything was so colorful.
I think just Mexico in general, where we were at, was generally pretty colorful.
And I don't know why I was so surprised, but I mean, it was just like a big splash of color in your face, and it was so inspiring to my soul to be there. Anyway, what about you?
even though like I'm a pretty extroverted, gregarious person, like if I was interacting with somebody new, I didn't want to come on too strong, which is a very strange thing for someone who's like out there. So I remember being like really uncomfortable, like being in any sort of one-on-one situation with people. And I think traveling with you just made me more aware that that simple intimacy of like a one-on-one conversation or attempting to communicate with somebody is like a really beautiful thing, and it's not scary, and we should do it more often. I was just so scared of that before, and traveling is such a humble experience. Like it kind of strips away kind of everything to kind of like leave you bare, like you had mentioned earlier. Like it can really heighten some things and make you very aware of different parts of your personality. Like I think every time that we've been out and about trying to like navigate a metro system in a foreign country, like I always look at it as like this like video game type task. Like, oh, we've got a puzzle to solve. Like I can figure this out. We just have to know that our hostel is 7 stops away.
Well, and the other fun piece of that is we've never, just had like our phones work abroad. And so, now people are like, you take the brain workout and it's like, oh, I just punched it in. And, we did that in New York and that was helpful.
Which is like a foreign country.
Might as well be. And yeah, and it's like, oh, you go here, you walk this way, take this train, get off here. And
Takes a lot of the serendipity out of travel and things that have happened to us.
right, like getting on the wrong train and then,
Getting on the wrong train multiple times.
we've had lots of really great adventures and misadventures and yeah, it's just so good to disconnect from your phone and like get those screens out of your faces and look at other people's faces and
Maybe with a mask.
you know
Or not.
what do you hope to do with this podcast, Jordan?
I think my hope would be to get people to be thinking more creatively about travel, and for people who've never traveled before, kind of using our stories, our anecdotes, our misadventures. And because we are not presenting ourselves as experts, like that can be very intimidating, I think, for people. Like as if there's one perfect way to travel, which is how my brain works.
I was just going to say with this podcast, I hope to inspire others to be curious about the world that we live in, while participating and learning about others and trying to put kindness first, which isn't always easy. It's easy to be frustrated, and I was talking about this, like when you go on vacation or like you work really hard to take a trip and then you feel very entitled to your experience and it's like I can do what I want, behave how I want, and everyone just has to deal with it. And some people, like, traveling is a privilege, even if you don't feel like you're privileged in your like day to day. Not everybody gets to travel. I mean, especially like now, like pandemic life, post pandemic. I mean, if we're even saying that, I don't know. But it's important that the people have been through trauma and, I've just noticed it a lot with people on the road, like just driving more aggressively. And so just like I'm saying, it's not easy, but just to try to just be more kind.
And I think I had read that the term for like the travel vibe for coming out of the pandemic has been revenge travel. Not like I'm going to go get vengeance on this country, but like I need to make up for these past couple years, and to remember that. I think that's a good point with our podcast is we're going to be talking about different countries that are very popular for people to go to. Obviously, we're going to be talking about pre-pandemic experiences, but to also hopefully humanize some of these places and people, and giving you something to consider when you're preparing for your trip to Thailand or you're getting ready to go to Germany for the first time. So again, thank you so much for listening to what we have to say. Again, this is just our personal experiences, what we've done, and I hope that you can get a sense of the world from listening to us. So
yeah, even if you're not planning on traveling, but you want to listen to our shenanigans,
We'll
Like-
paint you a Sonic photo.
I feel like this was a little more of like a somber, like first episode. This is who we are. This is what we mean. But I feel like going forward, it should be a little more.
A little more pizzazzy.
Yeah, I think it will be. And, I just think it's not going to be perfect, but life's not perfect and we're not perfect. And, but we appreciate you listening. And
In our first couple episodes, we're going to do some of the ones that kind of came first in our lives. So I think we'll talk about our episodes will be international, but then we'll also break down places in Oregon because that's obviously where our hearts are. So our first couple episodes, we'll do one about kind of the North Oregon coast, and then our first international one will be about Belgium.
wow.
That was my Belgian accent, can't you tell? I have chocolates in my mouth.
Ellen's going to be so impressed.
She's going to be very upset with me.
Okay. Well, I think with that, we're going to bid you adieu.
Adieu, and adieu to you too. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, kids.
3, 2, 1.
Exploragonians.
Do you like that?
Exploragonians. Do you like it? Exploragonians. I like it.
Exploragonians.
Yeah. Okay, what? What? Whoa.
Whoa,
You're
what?
like ready to
What?
bust out.
What? What? Exploragonians. Oh, we're recording. Oh, shit, we've been recording.
Okay, so what is it?
Fuck, I don't know.
What is an Exploragonian?
Armadillo. Armadillo bear.
Answer the question. What is it?
It's an Oregonian.
That.
Explores.
Excellent.